everyone, it's Katie from Paradise Falls family. In this video we'll be taking you through our Disney Alaskan Cruise from Vancouver in August 2024 aboard the Disney Wonder. This was our 5th Disney cruise and our 5th Disney ship, and we loved exploring the Wonder. There's so much to say that we've split this vlog in two. In part 1 here we'll talk you through our time on board, what an Alaskan cruise involves, what it's like, and what we did on our cruise. I'll start with a rundown of what we got up to, the route the ship takes, some information on Glacier Day in particular, before I finish with some tips on things like viewing the wildlife, the northern lights, the weather and what to pack. We'll do our best to pass on as much information as possible to help you prepare for your cruise. In part 2 coming next, we'll talk about some of the more practical bits, give an overview of the ship and our tips for your trip. If we scoot over anything in this vlog, don't worry, we'll cover it off in part 2, so make sure to subscribe to support the channel and to catch the second part of this vlog. Disney run weekly Alaskan cruises out of Vancouver every year from May to September. Each cruise is generally 7 nights other than the odd exception, and there are 2 main itineraries. These are very similar, with 2 days at sea, 1 day glacier viewing, which is basically a 3rd day at sea, and then stops at Juneau, Ketchikan, and then a 3rd stop, which is sometimes Icy Strait Point and then sometimes Skagway, depending on which itinerary you booked. I'll talk through our itinerary in more detail as we go. So back to the beginning of our cruise. Our embarkation day began in Vancouver at the Pan Pacific Hotel. I'll talk a bit more about the hotel in our Vancouver vlog later in the series, but it was a lovely place to stay, right above the cruise terminal, so we didn't actually have to go outside if we didn't want until we were boarding the ship itself. The ship docks right next to the hotel, so we were able to go and see it from the hotel lobby or outside while we were waiting for our check-in time for the cruise. We enjoyed a chilled morning in the hotel and had our luggage picked up by the hotel porters. The hotel offers a brilliant service where they pick up your luggage from your room and ensure it's loaded onto the ship, so you don't have to worry about lugging it downstairs and sorting it yourself. The recommended tip was around $3 to $6 per bag, which felt reasonable, and it worked brilliantly for us. The next time we saw our luggage, it was waiting for us outside of our cabin door on the cruise. So then it was just a case of wandering downstairs at our port arrival time and following the signs to the cruise terminal and check-in. The queues were pretty short and moved really fast. There was a really short wait and then we were allowed to board the ship. Everything ran like clockwork, much better than the boarding process in New York on our last Disney cruise.
Disney Wonder, please welcome Walking Sutton family.
Thank you. As usual, we were greeted on board as a family, which is always a lovely moment, and on the Wonder you're welcomed into the main lobby or hall on deck 3. As with the other Disney ships, this area is the central hub with something always going on. We were so excited to be on board and set out to explore the ship until our stateroom was ready. Our first stop was to go up a deck to the deck 4 balcony where Minnie Mouse was greeting guests. We always like to meet a character or two as soon as we get on board, as there are always characters waiting here around the atrium and they rarely have any queues. Then we always head straight off to get some food, again before the queues build up, so we were off to Cabanas, the buffet on board, for our lunch. We absolutely love Cabanas, it has a great selection of food and it's always brilliant quality. We were able to enjoy our food with amazing views out across the city of Vancouver and the harbour with the seaplanes landing and taking off, and we were able to just catch our breath, take our time and settle into the cruise. With lunch sorted, we now had time to start enjoying the ship and exploring. In the past, we've used this time to hit the pool while it's not that busy, but it was a little bit overcast, so we went for our next favourite, the sports courts. We had fun playing some table tennis and basketball, all the time surrounded by amazing city views. We took the opportunity to get plenty of photos of the skyline and the famous funnel, and then by around 1:30 we were allowed into our stateroom. Our luggage was waiting outside ready for us, so we were able to get unpacked and start to get settled into our cabin. Our silver Castaway Club gifts were also waiting for us. This is our 5th Disney cruise, so we're now gold members, but you don't get your gold gifts until your 6th cruise, so we'll have to wait for those next time. Our room was an inside room. Generally, we're happy with an inside room, but of course it's nicer to have a window or a veranda if we can. If the price seems reasonable value, we'll often choose to upgrade. However, for Alaskan cruises, these rooms really come at a premium and have some pretty crazy prices, sometimes almost double that of an inside room, so we were never going to pay that much for an upgrade. It was something that did play on our mind though, as obviously one of the key aspects of an Alaskan cruise is to enjoy the scenery and views. However, it comes down to how you spend your time and how much time you'll spend in your room. We generally don't spend much time in our room and accepted that we just need to make an effort to spend more time on the outer decks. For us, this worked absolutely fine. In an ideal world, it would have been nicer to have a veranda, so if you heard that there were whales or northern lights spotted, you could just take a quick look outside. But then again, they wouldn't necessarily have been on the side of the ship that your veranda was facing anyway, so really, we didn't feel like we missed out much at all. The room itself was as lovely as always, with a double bed and then bunk beds for the kids, which are made up and pulled down by your room attendant, then put back every day. Because we'd booked the deluxe inside stateroom rather than the standard, we had slightly more space, and then we had the split bathroom, which is 2 rooms with a separate toilet and shower room, which is always handy with there being 4 of us. There was space for luggage under the bed and then plenty of storage, so we were really comfortable in this room. It was on deck 2 aft, right at the back of the ship. The complete opposite to our New York cruise where we were right at the front and had rough seas and sickness. We honestly didn't feel the ship moving much at all on this cruise, so had no sickness problems this time, which was a relief. The seas themselves were generally flat, as it's a pretty sheltered route. We took the opportunity to settle into our room, unpack and put out our magnets and fish extender on our door, before heading to the mandatory muster drill, which was in Animator's palette for us. I've explained the fish extender process in a separate short, which you can find on our channel, but basically it's a gift exchange arrangement that we love taking part in on each cruise. I'll go into more detail on what it is and how it works in part 2 of this vlog. With the muster drill done, we set off to explore the ship and have a look around and play some more basketball. It was then time for the sail away party on the top deck, which is always really fun. Make sure to get here a little earlier if you want a decent spot, as it does get crowded. The ship actually set sail during this around 5 PM, sailing out of the harbour and under the Lionsgate Bridge with great views of Stanley Park, so it was a lovely start to the journey.
Here we go! Disney Wonder, you're on vacation!
The ship then sails north up the Inside Passage, which is basically a stretch of protected ocean running from Washington State up into Alaska, which has sufficiently deep water for cruise ships to sail next to land and steep mountainsides, making for some spectacular views. The first part of the route goes between Vancouver Island and the mainland as the ship heads north towards Alaska. This stretch is really scenic, with lots of little islands, and it's home to lots of orcas, particularly in the area in the north of Vancouver Island and Blackfish Sound. We'd actually heard stories of orcas waiting for big ships in this area to play in the wake, and we were keen to be on deck to keep an eye out. We thought this was going to clash with our dinner plans, but that being said, the ship didn't actually make much progress north, initially going really slowly, and wasn't even midway up Vancouver Island by nightfall, so don't worry about this on your first night. Your best bet for whale watching in this area is on the way back on the final day. Back to our evening meal, and as usual we'd reserved a spot on the first dining sit-in at 5:45, and our first night was in the Triton's restaurant just off the main lobby. There are 3 main dining rooms on the ship: Triton's, Animator's Palette and Tiana's Place. You're assigned a dining room and a table each night, with 2 nights in each and then an extra night in one of them on a 7-night cruise. These are assigned by Disney and can be viewed in the Disney Cruise app once you're on board. The Triton's restaurant is Little Mermaid themed, but this is very subtle, so it's much like the Royal Court on the Disney Fantasy, for example. It's very classy and beautiful, and it's a lovely setting. We were seated on table 73, which was pretty close to the middle of the room, and it was a really good spot, even if it was a little hemmed in by other tables, which were all put very close together. Of course, the food and service was amazing as usual. On Disney ships, your servers stay with you every evening, meaning they get to know you and you them, which is a lovely aspect to the Disney cruises. Our servers were great and again helped make our cruise really special, catering to our preferences and requests and chatting with the kids. We've noticed the servers are a little more stretched than they used to be. This is not a slight on them, as you can tell they're trying their very best, but it appeared like they're being pulled in too many different directions and perhaps don't have the time to devote like they've done in the past. Nevertheless, it's still a great service and a lovely aspect to the cruise. The rest of our evening was spent relaxing and we had an early night. There's a lot to do on board with plenty of evening entertainment, but the main draws are the 3 shows on board: the Golden Mickeys, Dreams and Frozen. Each of these are on 1 night each, with 2 shows a night, so you can catch them in the opposite time slot to your dinner reservation. There is other entertainment on the other evenings, including a magician and a comedian, but these usually aren't our thing, so we tend to skip these and have a more chilled evening instead. We usually enjoy a night swim sometimes as well, but did find that the pools often closed a little earlier on this cruise than we've seen in the past. Our first full day was a day at sea, so it was a case of taking it easy and enjoying the ship. We enjoyed breakfast and lunch in cabanas, and the rest of the day was spent in the pool, giving out our fish extender gifts and enjoying some of the entertainment on board. An Alaskan cruise also includes some free talks on the state and the wildlife, given by an onboard expert. In our case, this was a man called Pete Griffin, a retired forest ranger who gave several talks throughout the cruise, a couple on the first morning, one on Glacier Day, and then again on the final day at sea. These covered various topics like living in Alaska, the wildlife, whale watching tips, and then giving information on each of the stops on the cruise. The kids didn't fancy these, but Greg went along to a few and he said they were brilliant. Pete was also available around the ship throughout the cruise to answer questions, so this was a really nice touch and helped us learn a little bit more about the area. There was a Disney Vacation Club member celebration around lunchtime, which was a fun little event with free drinks and a fun game show and character meet, in our case Goofy, for DVC members to get together. We popped along to this and remembered to pick up our daily free DVC gift, which is available on all cruises from the DVC desk. We've had everything from bags, caps, lip balms, pop sockets and more throughout our cruises. Then of course you've got loads of character meets, including Mickey and the gang, princesses, Marvel characters, and later in the cruise, Mirabelle and Bruno from Encanto were also out meeting on one of the days. Coda the bear also pops up sometimes on Deck 4 on Glacier Day. This one doesn't appear on the app, so make sure to go and wander Deck 4 if Coda is one of the character meets that is a must-do for you. As well as this, you've got loads of trivia games to enjoy, learn to draw characters, crafts and loads of other stuff to do, which can all be found in the app. We also did a bit of shopping, so I'll quickly mention the Alaskan themed merchandise. The Alaskan cruises have lots of special items for sale on board. This include themed soft toys, clothing, pins, decorations, Pandora charms and things like that. They also sell more specialist items like warm weather clothing and binoculars for whale watching. Some of this is very popular and can sell out very quickly, and there are massive queues waiting for these shops to open on the first evening for this reason. We were fortunate that most things were pretty well stocked, and we think the only thing that really sold out was the Minnie Mouse Alaskan soft toy, but we have heard of other things selling out quickly on other cruises, so be quick if you have something specific in mind that you want to grab. Of course, we also spent plenty of time on deck, in and around the pool and playing basketball. The weather on this cruise was pretty decent, not too hot but warm enough to go in the pool which was heated, and the hot tubs were lovely to relax in, if a little bit busy most of the time. It also gave us the chance to do some whale watching too. You do really have to watch the water and look for spouts, so binoculars or a camera zoom lens come in really handy here. In preparing for this trip, we bought a cheap second-hand zoom lens for our camera, and it was one of our best buys, making it much easier to spot whales and take some fantastic pictures of the wildlife throughout our trip. We didn't spot much on the first day, but we did later on in the cruise, which I'll come to in a moment. Another tip here is to join the cruise Facebook group and WhatsApp groups. WhatsApp works on the cruise even without purchasing the internet package, and this group was invaluable in helping each other spot whales and the northern lights, so we'd really recommend joining this if you can find one, or even setting one up. Our evening meal this time was in Animator's Palette, one of our favourite dining rooms, which changes from black and white to colour as the evening progresses, and it's topped off by Sorcerer Mickey arriving at the end of the meal. It was loads of fun, the food and service were brilliant, and it was a lovely meal. We then enjoyed some free drinks, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, which are available in the lobby and are given out on formal night, and then it was time for the Golden Mickey show. This is basically a collection of Disney songs loosely linked together as a pretend awards show. It was fun and entertaining, if a little bit cheesy, but it's worth seeing if you're a Disney fan. The theatre does fill up, so we always try and get there about 30 minutes before to get a decent seat, and also to fill up our popcorn bucket, which once you've got it has incredibly cheap refills and is really good value. You can use any popcorn bucket purchased on past cruises or from the Disney parks to save some money here too. Throughout the first day, we'd continued travelling up the coast into Alaskan waters, and by the evening we were just south of Ketchikan, where we also changed time zones. You're reminded on board to reset your clocks, but keep this in mind as we travelled an hour backwards. Overnight we continued travelling up north towards Dawes Glacier. The next morning, our second full day on board, it was Glacier Day, and what turned out to be our favourite day of the cruise. This is essentially another day at sea, but the scenery all day is amazing and it has such a special atmosphere on board. The morning starts with the ship continuing up the coast from around 9:30 to 11:30 being the best time for whale watching. At around 11:30 the ship turned down the Endicott Arm, which is basically a narrow channel with hills and mountains either side. At the entrance to the arm is Sumdum Glacier, which is a hanging glacier in that it doesn't reach all the way down to the water. You then spend a few hours slowly travelling down the arm until you reach the glacier, which for us was Dawes Glacier. Spending some time there and the ship slowly turns to give everyone a really good chance to see it, before heading back up the arm, leaving it at around 6 p.m. There is actually an excursion that you're able to book to take you closer to the glacier in a smaller boat. However, this was really expensive and it wasn't something that we were that fussed on, so we didn't book on this. The ship doesn't get massively close to the glacier itself, but close enough to enjoy it and get some good pictures, which was enough for us. We also found that we were at the glacier long enough that generally there weren't big crowds and everyone had plenty of time to have a look and get their pictures from every angle on deck. And the ship does a 360-degree turn, so you don't need to stake out a spot at the front of the ship for this reason. You can also spot icebergs in the water and wildlife like seals and eagles. You can also sometimes spot mountain goats, moose, bears and wolves if you're lucky enough, particularly on the beaches, but we didn't spot any of those unfortunately. They did, however, lug an iceberg on board, which was cool, and it was sat on the pool deck for the rest of the cruise as it very slowly melted. This was a cool little touch to see and feel an iceberg up close. We started Glacier Day with a room service breakfast, which we'd pre-ordered the night before by leaving our card outside of our room. Then it was a case of wrapping up warm for a day on the top decks. Fortunately for us, the weather was glorious. It was lovely and warm with sunshine all day, and the kids spent pretty much all afternoon in the pool while we took it in turns to enjoy the views. It did still get a little bit windy on the very top decks, so you still need your layers, but it was really comfortable and it was just a perfect day. After breakfast, we headed up so I could join the queue for the character meets on the top deck. Glacier Day is the only day that the characters wear their Alaskan outfits, so we wanted to make sure to get some good pictures. Mickey is out at 9 a.m. and Minnie at 9:15, with the rest, Goofy, Donald, Pluto and Daisy, appearing later in the day. They do come out multiple times, but the queues are massive, so we went early and I jumped in the queue at 8:15 while Greg and the kids explored. This meant I was quite near the front and saved a fair bit of time, and then we hopped over to the Minnie Mouse line when we were done. These are some of our favourite pictures of the trip, so well worth it. The queuing was made really enjoyable as we were able to look for whales at the same time, and as soon as we got up on deck there were whales all around the ship all morning. So this is a great time to get out on deck and spot some wildlife. These were mainly humpback whales, but we did spot some orcas and the odd porpoise, otter and seal. There are blankets available dotted all around the ship to help wrap up warm, and there is free hot chocolate and cookies. This is given out under the shelter at the front of the ship, but you can also get hot chocolate throughout the cruise from all of the drink stations. It was lovely and creamy and sweet, so it was our go-to drink throughout the cruise and really warms you up when the wind is whipping around. There are drinks vendors dotted around too, selling alcoholic extras and branded flasks if you want something extra from their trolleys. Then around the pool area, the view from the front of the ship of the glacier was put up on funnel vision or the big screen, so you could check the ship's progress and see the view without even leaving the pool. However, even being just sat down next to the pool, you could see the mountains rising either side of the ship, and it was so atmospheric and relaxing. We spent pretty much all day up there, only popping down briefly for lunch in cabanas and to deck 4 when we'd heard through our WhatsApp group that Coda the bear was greeting, so we managed to get a quick picture. I believe that even though this is never advertised on the app, you can meet this character most of the day on deck 4. After a wonderful day, we spent dinner back in Animator's Palette. Glacier Day is also the Frozen Night, which is basically in place of Pirate Night for those of you familiar with that on the other ships. And it has a special menu, and it's where you spend your third night in your nominated dining room. It's a lovely way to end the day. There's a frozen deck show freezing the night away up on the top decks too, which we checked out briefly, but this is very much aimed at younger children with music and dancing and some characters, so we didn't stay for long. Again, this gets very busy, so get here early if you want a good view. The next 3 days were our 3 port days. I'll talk about those in the next few vlogs and what we got up to, but generally port days on an Alaskan cruise tend to be quite long in that the ship docks early and leaves quite late, so you have plenty of time to explore, which is really nice. So our days were generally filled with exploring and relaxing on the ship, followed by our evening meal. The first of these was Tiana's Place on our Icy Strait Point day. This is themed around Tiana's restaurant from Princess and the Frog, with live singing and entertainment, including from Tiana herself, and Louis the Crocodile even makes an appearance. This was probably our favourite restaurant of the cruise in terms of the theming, menu, entertainment, and it felt more spacious with the tables more spread out, so overall a lovely relaxing meal. For our second port day in Juneau, it was back to Triton's, followed by the Frozen stage show in the theatre. This is a shortened version of the Broadway show, and it's a brilliant retelling of the classic story that's loads of fun. There was also a DVC social hour at 7 p.m. in the Cove Cafe that evening, so another opportunity to mingle and get some free drinks. We could pick any drink we wanted that was under $18 a drink. Then our third port day was Ketchikan, and this was our opportunity for our third and final meal in Animator's Palette. This time we were able to draw our own characters and then they're animated up on the screen, which is always one of our favourite parts of any Disney cruise. Our final day was at sea as we headed back down to Canadian waters and Vancouver. Again, we spent it relaxing around the ship with breakfast and lunch in cabanas and our evening meal in Tiana's Place. The days at sea are also your opportunity to enjoy churro waffles in cabanas, so make a note if you enjoy these like I do. Then there was the diaper dash, which we always enjoy watching. Bingo, which we've never tried before but gave it a go. Unfortunately no winnings this time though. And a Broadway guest artist presentation, which was fascinating and was basically a talk from one of the onboard performers, but it was so interesting, so we'd really recommend that. Eva got her hair braided, which was available for a small charge at Deck 9 midship. This had limited hours and booked up, so go early on in the cruise and make a reservation if it's something you're interested in. Then of course there was plenty of time for more basketball, swimming and some last minute fish extender gift drop-offs. In terms of the route, we obviously started at Ketchikan and by the following evening were sailing down between Vancouver Island and the mainland again. Blackfish Sound at the northern end of Vancouver Island is a really good area to spot orcas, so we were advised that around 4:30 to 7 p.m. on the final day at sea was one of the best times to try and see some orcas. We made sure to spend some time up on deck, of course playing some basketball too, and were really lucky spotting dolphins playing in the wake of the ship, humpback whales and a few orcas too. We received a tip-off on our WhatsApp group that someone had seen an orca, so we rushed out. We just missed a pod of around 5 or 6, but we did spot a pair swimming a distance away, which was really exciting to see. After this excitement and our last meal in Tiana's Place, there was one more show to enjoy, Dreams in the theatre. Again, this is basically a collection of classic Disney songs built around a loose storyline. It's lots of fun and worth going to see if you're a Disney fan. For us, it was slightly better than the Golden Mickeys, but they're both fairly similar. With the cruise nearly over, there was just time for the Till We Meet Again event in the main lobby, which is always held on the final night and is where all the characters gather to say goodbye. You have the chance for any final photos and character meets you might have missed out on. It's a manic 15 minutes or so, as we always try and get as many pictures as possible, but it's so much fun and a lovely way to finish off a cruise.
Now we meet
the time to say goodbye to all our company.
Come on, gosh!
Them I see.
See you real soon!
K-E-Y.
Why? Because we like you!
The next morning, we'd been assigned a dining room for breakfast. However, this requires you to bring everything with you at a set time, and it's usually very early. We normally do this, but on this occasion, we decided we'd try Cabanas one last time, which is open and doesn't have a set time that you need to visit. It was surprisingly not that busy, and it was a much more relaxing way to spend breakfast, with a lot more flexibility. Afterwards, we were able to wander the deck one last time before we headed down to the main lobby to disembark and enjoy some time in Vancouver. So that was a summary of everything we got up to on this cruise, and hopefully gives you an idea of how it works and what you can enjoy. I'll now just cover off a couple of specific things that we know we wondered about before we sailed. Firstly, wildlife. One of the big reasons that people come to Alaska is to enjoy the wildlife here, and we found it to be far more abundant than in the road trip part of our holiday, although maybe that was just down to luck. We spotted lots of eagles, some sea lions, otters, loads of seals, particularly in the harbour in Ketchikan and on Glacier Day. We were also told to look out for moose, mountain goats and wolves on Glacier Day, but didn't spot any on this occasion. We spotted lots of whales throughout the cruise, mostly humpbacks. They also have dolphins and porpoise, which we spotted a few of. Sometimes you have to look really hard and spend quite a bit of time on deck looking through binoculars or on the zoom lens. At other times, like the morning of Glacier Day, they just seemed to be everywhere we looked. We spent some time most evenings up on deck looking for whales and saw loads throughout the cruise. They're often at a distance as they don't tend to come too close to the ship, so usually you can't get decent footage or pictures, but it's cool to see nonetheless. In terms of orcas, whereas humpbacks are resident during the summer, orcas are transient, meaning that they are here but they move around and travel through the waters rather than staying here permanently. So they're commonly seen but are far from guaranteed, which isn't something we appreciated properly coming into the trip. We were told the best times and places to try and spot them were around the Endicott Arm, the morning of the Ketchikan day, and then the final sea day, particularly approaching Vancouver Island around Blackfish Sound. These are the areas that they're most commonly seen. Apparently they're often seen around Icy Strait Point too. In terms of organising whale watching, the main places to do this as an excursion were Icy Strait Point or Juneau. We went for Icy Strait Point and we'll talk through that in a separate vlog, but we've heard great things about Juneau too. Like a lot of these things, I think it comes down to a bit of luck on the day. In terms of bears, we were told to look out for them on the beaches as we sailed past. Unfortunately, we didn't spot any there, but there are loads of them around, both brown and black bears. There are 3 main excursions from the ship that you can take to try and view them in the wild. The first, which Greg did, is in Icy Strait Point, where you can see brown bears down by the Spassky River. Again, we'll talk through that in a separate vlog, but it was absolutely fantastic. There are then 2 more options in Ketchikan. One to see black bears that looked really good, but this has a minimum age limit, meaning that the kids couldn't take part, so we discounted this before we sailed. Then another is to go out to the Neats Bay Bear Observatory, but this is a full day tour by land and sea. Again, this looked really good, but it was pretty expensive and more intense being a full day tour, so we discounted this one as well. So there are a couple of options if you really want to see some bears. Moving on to excursions more generally. This is something to really budget for. The towns and ports you visit themselves are relatively small, so if you want to get out and really experience a bit more, you'll need to book an excursion, either through Disney or through a local provider. There are loads of options which we'll talk through in our other vlogs looking at each of the ports, but these do add up in terms of money, particularly for a family of 4. However, there really is something for everyone. There's so much fun stuff you can do. Wildlife tours, fishing, ziplining, helicopter tours, seaplanes, ATV tours, just loads of things you can do, so plan in advance and get your excursions booked. Moving on to the Northern Lights. Alaska at this time of year is a great place to see the Northern Lights. However, it's of course a natural phenomenon, so it's very hard to predict. We do usually use an app called Aurora to help us when we're away, but we didn't have Wi-Fi on the ship, so this wasn't any use. This is where the cruise WhatsApp group came in handy again. We received a message on the evening of the Juneau day at around 11 PM saying that they could be seen off the back of the ship. Greg headed up and sure enough there they were. Fairly faint, not as bright and vivid as you might imagine, but nevertheless we saw the Northern Lights and we took it in turns to spend some time outside and get some cool pictures while the kids slept. It's not that easy to photograph, but we played around with the settings on our phones and managed to get some decent pictures in night mode. Obviously the lights are more visible the darker it is, which usually means in the middle of the night. However, at this time of year in Alaska, it got dark around 9:30 PM, so you don't necessarily have to stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning if you get lucky. And finally, just a quick note on the weather and packing. We really weren't sure what to expect. When you think Alaska, you think cold, but some of the forecasts were pretty mild and even quite warm. In the end, we found the weather to be very changeable, sometimes sunny but quite often wet. And even in nicer weather, it was nearly always quite windy up on deck, so bring big jumpers for whale watching if you're out on the deck. We spent most of the week in jeans with layers so we could cool off or warm up when we wanted, but we did take shorts just in case of a heat wave. We wore thermals on just one day for our whale watching, but we brought these more just to be warm and comfortable rather than them being essential. In terms of other stuff to pack, we bought new waterproof walking trainers and coats so we could stay dry. Thermals, as I mentioned, which we only used once. And we did bring gloves just in case, but never needed them. Remember though, this was August, so earlier or later in the year may be very different. Then as well as this, we brought along some decent binoculars and the new zoom lens on the camera that I mentioned previously. So I think that covers just about everything from our Alaskan cruise. We had an absolutely amazing time and would love to do another of these one day. We can't recommend it enough. Hopefully this has been useful to give you an idea of what to expect and what's useful for your trip. Part 2 of this vlog is coming next week, where we'll go into more detail on the ship and the practicalities and give some more tips, so make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss it and support us, as it really does make a big difference. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or any other tips, then please let us know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching.